A folk music composition and kyuis are heritage of the nations. The sounds of the great steppe are different instruments and melodious compositions. The great and mysterious music is on the program. The sounds of the great steppe. When we talk about Kazangap musician, a dombra decorated with an owl feathers appears in front of your eyes, and kyuis compositions as well. He is one of the singular musicians of Kazakh kyuis art. His name should be pronounced together with great composer Kurmangazi. Even the teachers of Kazangap were well-known kyuis players. For example, Usen Tor, a kyuis player, took a special place in the life of a musician. Usen Tor was also one of the great kyuis players. Today our program is dedicated to the kyuis player Kazangap Tilep Bergin Uli. There is a creative relations between Usen Tor and Kazangap in our program, and the acquaintance of these two kyuis players was also interesting. It is another story which became a legend.
Söntöre үйünde жоқ екен. Қараса анадай жерде Söntöre'nin домбырасы ілулі тұр екен.
Once Kazangap came to the famous kyuis player Usen Tor's house, but the musician was not at home. Kazangap saw a dombra which was hanged on the wall. Dombras were decorated with ornaments and with silver. Kazangap stood for a while, looked at the dombras, he was impressed and said, "What a beautiful dombra instrument." This dombra belonged to Usen Tor. He was a famous kyuis player. Then Kazangap asked for the daughter-in-law of Usen. "Dear daughter-in-law, can you give me, please, that dombra?" The daughter-in-law of Usen Tor replied to him, "Please do not ask, as we are not allowed even to touch it."
Bir alып бере қойсаңыз, ең болмаса бізге өнері жосты болар деп жаңағы олар да болмағаннан кейін келін айтады, "Ал енді мына домбыраны қарада орнына салып қояйық" дейді жаңағы. Сөйтіп Қазанғап алып домбыраны.
But Kazangap asked again with a superstition, being a great musician as Usen Tor. Then the daughter-in-law of the great musician allowed Kazangap to touch it, and he started to play this dombra. In that moment, Usen came to his house. Usen Tor saw a man who was playing on his instrument and was angry with him. His daughter-in-law explained to him as the stranger told to her he was a guest of God and she should let him play the instrument. At this moment, Usen Tor told to Kazangap, "Probably you are a traveler who saw my dombra and decided to play. Now show your talent and play a kyuis composition. If you are a talented player, you are welcome as a guest in my house. If you are not able to play, you will leave my house." And then, in order to introduce himself with the best way through a kyuis composition, Kazangap expressed all of his emotions. This kyuis is titled among people as Kokil.
Күйге салып, көкейге түскен көкілжан деп бір күйді тартқан екен. Ел арасында көкіл атанып кеткен. Тартысың бөлек екен, ұлығымның бойында мен білмейтін күйші жоқ еді. Бірақ естуші едім. Жалғыз ат.
You play in a singular and interesting way. There's not any cue player whom I do not know. But I heard there's a cue player as Kazangap who has only one horse. If I am right, probably you are Kazangap, as you have a completely different way of playing the dombra. Well, if you are that Kazangap, then feel yourself as an honorable person, and Hussein offered a place in his house with the following words: "Be my guest, please." And then Kazangap sat in an honorable place in the yurt house and told to Hussein, "Well, a guest, so a guest." Hussein Tor told to Kazangap, "Nay, Kazangap, if you are a cue player, please could you play Ak Jilem? Now could you play another cue composition, Bala Ak Jilem?" Then Kazangap played him the compositions. Kazangap played all 62 different melodies of Ak Jilem cue composition. Finally he told to Hussein, "I played a lot of cues for you. Can you play one of my own cue compositions?" "Why not? I can play yours later," replied Hussein. Kazangap played one cue composition. During the play he used one of the tricks and started playing the dombra from the end. And when he started to play in this way on the dombra, the instrument slipped out from Hussein's hands. Then he who exclaimed, "Wow, Kazangap, you take with your agility. And I do not say that you play better than me," said Hussein Tor, and tried to turn everything into a joke. This cue, which was played by Kazangap, was a reason to stop the performance and was recognized by people as Yirsma. During his play, the dombra slipped out from Hussein's hands.
Isırılıp çıkıp кетті ғой Қазанға Hüseyin Төренің қолынан. Сол күй мынау.
Isirma words were told when the dombra slipped out from the hand of Hussein Tor, then the cue was titled as Isirma. Abdul Hamid Raimbergenov is a well-known cue player, scientist, and researcher. He's one of the musicians who promoted Kazangap's cue compositions, and he's a teacher of the Komengazi Academy of Art. It is impossible to be a teacher for everyone, and to teach cue compositions is not an easy job.
Қонақ болып үйінде жатқанда Қазанғапқа айтады, бір күн таңертең. Ал Қазанғап жан ерігіп жатқанша осы бір аңға барып қайтайықшы.
Once Kazangap stayed at the house of Hussein Tor. Hussein offered to Kazangap to go with him for hunting. "Well, Kazangap, let's go for hunting. I was given a falcon." He offered to check this bird's ability. And then Kazangap said to him, "Well, why not, Uncle Hussein? Let's go." Both of them went for hunting. After a while, one beast ran before them. The falcon was not able to catch it. Hussein Tor started to call the falcon as "Kitu, Kitu, come back, back."
Ана құс баратта төмендеп барып аңды ілмей қайтадан көтеріледі. Hüseyin Töre шақырады, қайтып қайт деп. Сөйтсе құсы қайтып келмейді. бір оралады да қайтадан ұша жөнеледі. Сөнтірі ай қиту қайт деп айқайлап.
The bird does not return to the owner. It flies up and flies away again. Usentor started to run with his horse with the words, "Kitu, Kitu, come back." Eventually he was tired and his horse as well. Then the bird flew into the thickets and completely disappeared from view. And then Usentor said, "This bird's disgraced me before my guests." It showed as it was not a trained bird. Usentor was very angry. When he came home, he did not even drink tea as he was upset and went to bed. Kazangap came to Usentor and told to him, "If you are so offended by a stupid bird, how can you be a Tor?" I wrote one cue composition, how you called the bird Kitu, Kitu, go, go, and asked him to listen to the cue, and then Kazangap started to play his cue for Usentor. Here is the cue which is written by Kazangap to return the bird.
Bir kuydu tartады. Сондағы Қазанғаптың шығарған құс қайтару деген күйі міне.
Subsequently, he performed this cue. If you listen to the composition, you will be able to hear the sounds as Kitu, Kitu, come back. The final phrase he wrote to the bird with the words, "Go, please," and the bird flew away and disappeared. Through the sound, he expressed all the emotions. It is written in history about Usentor as he lived 95 years in 1925. When he achieved his 90 years in 1920, Usen organized a celebration of his anniversary. Kazangap received a message as Usentor died and then came to the village of Usentor. He saw a lot of people in the village of Usentor. When all people gathered together, Usen came to the middle of the crowded people and told to them, "Hey, my people, you probably think Usentor is in his 90 years and lost his mind. You probably think, why did he decide to celebrate his 90 years? My children will not celebrate my 90th year after my death. That's why I decided to invite all of you now. If I die, then my children, of course, will keep all the traditions and organize a funeral dinner to my honor. I lived my 90 years with dignity. I ruled here in the native land. During the 90 years, probably, I offended someone. I collected these cattle. While I'm still alive, I want to apologize for everything. Who doesn't have cattle, please take these cattle. If I have touched someone with a word, forgive me, please."
All life is regret. Therefore, my people, while I am alive, I want to ask forgiveness from you," and took his dombra in his hand. Usentor was a great cue player. He started to play the dombra with the words, "This life passed so quick." Usen played his cue and told to the people, "Let this cue be the last in my life." The fingers of the 90-year-old man were hardly moving on the strings of the instrument. Then Usentor turned to Kazangap that was sitting next to him. "Hey Kazangap Jean, finish this cue, please." And then Kazangap took the dombra in his hand and finished the performance of the cue, Past Life. Among the people, this cue was known as the cue of Usentor, but some people dispute it as it belonged to Kazangap. Kazangap's cue compositions study separate as the Kazakh cue art form. The legendary cue player has 124 works of cue compositions. But we received only 50 to 60 cue compositions. He knew how to play the dombra on both the left and right sides. As a musician, he knew all the methods of playing the dombra, steppe, kyuis, and kyuis. He was an expert of the dombra instrument and a great composer, who formed a great cue tradition. There are 62 versions of the well-known cue, Akjilen, and other cues which rarely played in sound among the people. Kazangap's majority cue compositions are based on certain events. While you listen to the cue composition of Kazangap, the following sentence comes to your mind as, "Cue has its own language."